Hi everybody, this is John Spritzler from Boston. I'm the editor of pdrboston.org, an egalitarian revolutionary website. And this is our button that I refer to now and then. Let's remove the rich from power, have real, not fake democracy, with no rich and no poor. This is the button that literally going on to 1,000 or more people, random people in public places, when asked, do you think the message on the button is a good idea or a bad idea? It's always 80%, sometimes in the 90% of people who say yes, it's a good idea. Some people say it's a great idea. And that's why egalitarian revolution is possible, not easy, but possible, because it is in fact what most people want. What the button calls for is the heart of egalitarian revolution. But the idea of an egalitarian society, which is fundamentally different from our capitalist society and also fundamentally different from anything that's gone under the name of socialism or communism, the idea of an egalitarian society is one that people are essentially totally unfamiliar with. And this is something that I hope to address with this video and future videos, and a recent one that I made introducing the basic ideas of egalitarianism. And it's one that I addressed in much greater depth in my recent book called No Rich and No Poor, which is available on Amazon as a Kindle or a paperback version, and I hope you'll read it. I hope that these videos will just pique your curiosity enough to want to read it. My companion book, also published recently, is called Divide and Rule. It's about how we're prevented from building the kind of movement that can win an egalitarian revolution by being pitted against each other, most commonly along the lines of left versus right or progressive versus conservative, NPR radio listeners versus conservative talk radio listeners. The ruling class has been extremely effective in producing a situation where, although 80% and probably more of the have-nots of the American public want to remove the rich from power and have real, not fake democracy and no rich and no poor, half of those have-nots think the other half are so terrible that it would be out of the question to unite with them for that common goal. And this is how the ruling class stays in power. So that's what my book called Divide and Rule is about, how that's happening, and more importantly, how to prevent it from happening. As I keep pointing out, it's a majority of people who identify as conservative, as well as a majority of people who identify as progressive, want egalitarian revolution. I know this because when I go to groups, like, for example, not only Bernie Sanders rallies where people love the button, but I went to a pro-Donald Trump rally this past summer and randomly tapped people on the shoulder, 50 of them, and asked them, you think the message on this button's a good idea or a bad idea? And 86%, 43 of the 50 people said it was a good idea, or a great idea. And many of them took the button when I offered it to them. All of them took the button when I offered it to them, of those 86%. And many of them pinned the button right onto their shirt, right on the spot. And so, yes, the 8% of the people at that same rally were verbally very hostile to the idea of removing the rich from power, no rich and no poor. So what we have is a situation where among the conservatives, and I'm talking about, this rally was one that was all white, and it was one where they were wearing the "Let's Make America Great" red caps and flying American flags and wearing NRA insignia T-shirts. It was sponsored by a state group called Gun Owners Action League as a rally in front of the State House against an infringement on the Second Amendment right to bear arms. So we've got a situation where the people who want this egalitarian revolution don't know that they're the majority. The people at this rally, the pro-Trump rally, they had no idea that 86% of them wanted egalitarian revolution and 8% opposed it. That's because right-wing type organizations obscure the goal of removing the rich from power and having no rich and no poor. They get people simply to talk about something that they all agree with, even if they're split on the egalitarian goal, in this case the right to bear arms. So an egalitarian revolutionary movement can win if people aim to build it explicitly and to make it strong and large. It can win because it can get large enough to successfully persuade a critical mass of members of the military to refuse orders to attack it and to use their weapons to defend it against those who would attack it violently. Okay, so in order to build that movement, we have to know what we're for, not just a list of things that we're against. And I want to discuss now, elaborate more on the previous video about how the economy works in an egalitarian society. So first of all, the principle of an egalitarian society for the economy is from each according to reasonable ability, to each according to need or reasonable desire, with scarce things distributed equitably according to need. Okay, so what this means is that when people decide by mutual agreement to enter into what I call a sharing economy, what that means is that they have all mutually agreed to have an economy based on that principle, from each according to ability to each according to need, in short. And this mutual agreement is one that's based on people being mutually satisfied that the other people are contributing reasonably according to ability and only taking reasonably according to need or reasonable desire. And the sharing economy, based on that mutual agreement, can be as large as people want it to be. It can be so large, actually, that it conceivably could be the entire population of the planet. And the way the mutual agreement is arrived at and maintained is by what I call voluntary federation, which is something I discussed in the earlier video, but basically the people who support the values of equality in the sense of no rich and no poor, and the value of mutual aid, those people I call egalitarians. It's the vast majority of people on the planet, the vast majority of people in most local communities in the United States. The egalitarians in a local community, by which I mean something on the size of 30 or 40,000 people, a size which, if all the egalitarians in that community were invited to participate as equals in the local assembly, which is where laws for the local community are written, the number of people who would likely want to come to such a meeting could fit in the same large room. Is it like a plenary meeting of big conferences that takes place in large hotel rooms and so forth. But it's not written in stone. The size of the community would be whatever people think is appropriate. But the point is that the only laws that people in that local community have to obey are laws written by the local community's local assembly of egalitarians. No higher body can write a law that telling people what they have to do. And what this means is that if you live in a local community, and everyone does live in some local community, if you're an egalitarian, as opposed to being hostile to egalitarian values, then the only laws that you are required to obey are laws that you had an opportunity to, and might very well have been one of the people who wrote the law, equal with all the other people who wrote the law. There was no having to obey some so-called representative who claims by having won an election or whatever to be allowed to be a dictator, to write a law that you have to obey even if you disagree with it. Okay, so now comes the how the economy works, and the basic idea is that in order to remain in the sharing economy, people have to maintain their reputation as contributing according to reasonable ability and taking according to need or only reasonable desire. And this applies to individuals and to economic enterprises. And when I say economic enterprise, I mean everything from a hot dog, a person who, this is not a money-based economy, so saying a hot dog vendor might give the wrong impression, but a person who provides hot dogs on the street corner to a giant multinational corporation. Those economic enterprises will only be considered members in good standing of the sharing economy if it is mutually agreed by the people in the local communities in that sharing economy agree that they are acting reasonably in terms of contributing and what they take. And this is a decision that is made by every local assembly by itself. And if they decide that an economic enterprise or a local community in a sharing economy, which again could be large, as large as the whole planet or any region smaller than that where people have mutually agreed to share among themselves this way. If a local community in its local assembly decides that some economic enterprise or some other local communities are not acting in accordance with the principle from each according to ability to each according to need, they have the option of saying, well, either that local community that we think is in violation of the principle, or that economic enterprise that's in violation of the principle, either they are excluded from the sharing economy that we're a part of, or we will leave and we'll maybe be in a smaller sharing economy with people that we mutually agree to share with, because we agree that they're contributing and taking according to the principle that we base the sharing economy on, from each according to ability to each according to need. So what that means is that since it is such a valuable thing to be a member of a very large sharing economy, people will try to maintain their reputation for being a good player in it. And when I say it's very valuable to be in a large sharing economy, what I mean is if you're in a sharing economy that only consists of, a little community of 30 or 40,000 people, then the only things that are available to you to take for free according to need or reasonable desire in exchange for being in good standing, in other words, being considered to be contributing according to reasonable ability, the only things available to you would be what's produced in that relatively small little community economically, which might not include the smartphone that you want, or a nice piece of furniture that was made elsewhere and so forth. But if you're in a sharing economy that includes a billion or more people, the variety of products and services that are available to you for free, according to need or reasonable desire, is enormous. So what's at stake in maintaining your reputation for contributing reasonably according to ability is huge. And the reputation in this context of an economic enterprise is what, in a sense, disciplines people in a sharing economy and an egalitarian society. It replaces the discipline of profit. So if a company under capitalism is poorly managed and fails to make a profit, it goes out of business. Well, in an egalitarian society, in the sharing economy, if an economic enterprise is poorly managed and gains itself a bad reputation for, it could be a bad reputation for any number of reasons. It could be that it has way too many people working in it for the small amount that it produces or the small number of services it provides. So it's sort of a reputation for extreme feather bedding. It could have a reputation for producing poor quality. It could have a bad reputation for producing good quality but of stuff that no one wants. It could have a reputation for producing good quality stuff that people do want but not providing it to the places where people want it. There are all sorts of reasons why a person or an economic enterprise would have a good or a bad reputation, all very reasonable, all very, in other words, they're all exactly the right reasons why you would want to promote or not promote the continuation of this or that economic enterprise, as opposed to profit. A company like BP, British Petroleum, could be making a huge profit by destroying the Gulf of Mexico. I don't think that we really think that profit is the best way to evaluate whether an economic enterprise is making the world better or not. But that's what we're living with today. So the way that reputation works is on every scale. Let's go back to the hot dog distributor on the street corner. In reality, in practical reality, the hot dog, I'll call them vendors, but they're not selling. They're giving people hot dogs if they can show an ID card that says that they're a member in good standing of the sharing economy. If the hot dog vendors would probably be in an association of hot dog vendors, or maybe an association of street vendors in general, or something like that. And this larger association would be an economic enterprise that would be evaluated as an economic enterprise by the local assembly of egalitarians. And so the local assembly of egalitarians wouldn't look at every single individual hot dog vendor and say, oh, you're doing fine, you're not doing fine, whatever. It would look at the association. It might have input, sort of like Facebook likes, or however people decide to acquire information about their assembly, and the local, however people would decide to acquire information about any given economic enterprise. And so a local assembly would either decide yes or no, it is in good standing or it's not, or maybe give a warning if it looks like it's not, and see if they improve. And this is the way we do it today with hospitals, for example. Hospitals and universities are certified, and there are bodies, the Good Housekeeping Seal of Approval, college certification, and so forth. There are bodies that certify large institutions, and we go by the reputation an institution has, in large part, whether it's properly certified or not. We don't, when we're choosing a hospital, go to the hospital first and look at every single orderly and nurse and doctor and make a decision that way. So an economic enterprise is going to try to maintain its good reputation. Well, that means that the people in a given economic enterprise, say a hospital, if they realize that they're getting a bad reputation because of a certain department in the hospital, let's say the emergency room, is getting a bad reputation, it's not providing the service reasonably, or it has a bunch of people hanging around, doing nothing, then it would want to take action to change, to make sure its reputation stays good. And so it would, talk to the people in the emergency room and say, hey, look at, you're giving us a bad reputation. We expect you to change. And if the emergency room itself has a particular few employees in it that are causing the bad reputation, well, then the people in the emergency room will go to them and say, hey, look at, you're giving us a bad reputation. The reputation of the economic enterprise has to be good for the enterprise to be considered to be a member in good standing of the sharing economy. And I don't think I emphasized this before, but the people who work at an economic enterprise are automatically considered members in good standing of the sharing economy if they are working at an enterprise that is considered in good standing. The only exception would be if a particular individual is identified as in gross violation of from each according to ability, each according to need. So if you might be a worker in a hospital that has a good reputation and therefore you are considered a member in good standing of the economic sharing economy. But if you go to a supermarket and load your truck up with all the steaks in the supermarket and someone reports it, well, you as an individual might be have your good standing revoked, and that would mean that you couldn't go to a store and just show your ID card and which shows that you're a member of good standing and take what you need or reasonably desire for free anymore. You'd have to barter or rely on charity or something. So that would be a serious problem. I discussed just now how the reputation works going downward at the level of smaller and smaller units. It also goes upwards. If you're part of a multinational corporation, that multinational corporation is evaluated by every local community's local assembly that it has any role in. And any local assembly can say, well, we think this corporation, maybe it's British Petroleum or something like that, that's doing something horrible. A local assembly anywhere could say, well, we don't want to be in a sharing economy with this huge multinational economic enterprise. Call it corporation, just for lack of a better word. And if enough, of course, if it's only one local assembly from one local community, then their choice is either to leave the sharing economy or to stay in it, even though they don't like the corporation that's also in it. But if enough local communities say, hey, none of us approve of this corporation, and either it is kicked out of the sharing economy that we're in, or we'll all leave. And of course that gets discussed at lots of levels, and eventually a decision is made. But the big corporation, the point here is that it risks the disaster if it does not have a good reputation. And if it gets kicked out of a huge sharing economy of 1 billion people, then all of its workers are going to lose their membership in good standing in that sharing economy, and it's going to be terrible. So there's a lot of pressure to maintain a good reputation, and And as I said, the reputation is based on providing a needed or desired product or service in a reasonable way to people who need or want it, which is very different from making a profit for the shareholders, even though you're destroying the Gulf of Mexico or producing, some poisonous substance or whatever, which is how our capitalist system works today. So, okay, I'm going to stop, and I hope you find this interesting, and you'll want to go on Amazon and get either my book No Rich and No Poor, which discusses what I was just saying now, and the other one, Divide and Rule, which discusses how we can actually win this kind of society. Thank you.